you don't need to throw spaghetti at the wall. There's a better way to do it. And it's going to expedite your decision making, and it's going to expedite your ability to make a difference and resonate and have more effective overall marketing, messaging, customer experiences that you're building. You're wasting time and money by not doing this.
Welcome to the Agents of Change, the podcast experience you've been waiting for your entire marketing career. Search, social, mobile, AI, blockchain, and neuromarketing. These are the Agents of Change, and so are you. Digital marketing success awaits, and your transformation begins now.
Welcome to another episode of the Agents of Change podcast, the podcast that's here to help you reach and engage more of your ideal customers online. My name's Rich Brooks. I'm your host. This is episode 591, powered by Flight New Media. Can't do it all yourself? You don't have to. I don't. I've got a crack team of designers, developers, and marketers here at Flight, and they're here for you too. They're ready to plug into your team with deep expertise in SEO, Google and Facebook ads, analytics, branding, and more. We've been doing this since 1997. Drop us a line at takeflight.com or theagentsofchange.com, and I will get back to you. One of the recurring discussions here at Flight are the pros and cons of split testing. I've been all in for years on split testing, but my team had a more nuanced take. Not that they were against split testing, just that many businesses don't get enough traffic to pull any meaningful data from the typical split test. Turns out they were right, and I'm man enough to admit it. Today's guest reinforces that idea by directing our attention away from just trying to bump up our conversion rate, and instead focusing on feedback from our best clients so we can go out and attract more of those same clients. There's more to client-led growth strategies than just that one little nugget, so let's get into today's interview and dig a little deeper. My next guest is a strategic advisor, author, and keynote speaker. With a passion for helping the tech industry turn customer value into revenue-generating outcomes, she developed the Customer-Led Growth Framework and co-authored the best-selling book, Forget the Funnel. She works with high-growth B2B SaaS like Bitly, Sprout Social, AppQs, DBT Labs, EverCommerce, and more. Today, we're going to dive into what customer-led growth can mean to your bottom line with Georgiana, Laudi, or as her friends and podcast host call her, Gia. Gia, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Rich.
All right. So how does one find themselves focusing on customer-led growth strategies as their specialty?
Oh, yeah, as in, how did I get here? As opposed to people who might need customer-led growth.
Yes.
So
I thought I was being clever, but I was just being confusing.
I get it. I'm there. I mean, background mostly in marketing, longest, amount of time spent on the discipline of marketing, studied communications in university, worked as part of the family business for a while, about a decade, about 20 years ago, and really got into online marketing and digital marketing. So that was my background, was doing conversion rate optimization before it was really a thing, social media marketing as it was just sort of getting off the ground. But I really fell in love with digital marketing. And then I discovered Twitter back when Twitter was cool. This was back in, 2008, 2009. And discovered a local community, a local tech community, and sort of fell in love with tech, fell in love with software as a service businesses and that business model, particularly because the skill set that marketers bring to that business model is wildly advantageous because recurring revenue businesses depend and live and die based on their ability to build long-term relationships with their customers. And so I was like, Eureka, I've found my people. And so I sort of dove into software as a service and tech businesses in at around 2010-ish in there. And I've sort of never looked back. And so that marriage of tech and marketing, and now what people are finally starting to realize is product marketing. And that discipline is finally sort of making its way into the broader sort of understanding. I really just love it. And so that's how I got here. And customer-led growth is really the framework that we developed to help teams make better decisions. So forget the funnel started as a workshop series dedicated to in-house folks working inside of tech companies, largely in customer-facing roles. And that's a whole other conversation. But one of the things that we have found that is most effective for helping teams make better decisions, get more buy-in and stakeholders, have a bigger influence just on driving revenue is really understanding customers and using customers as the sort of anchor for making better strategic decisions. And so that was where the framework came from. And that's what we've been doing ever since.
Nice. So for those people who may not be as familiar with the term, how do you define customer-led growth?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely not a term that has, it's sort of like, product marketing was 10 years ago. There's a lot of different interpretations to it. And really, the name is not important. But what is important is basically using and relying on customer insight to help you make better decisions. You don't have to guess. So the framework is really based on this: get inside your best customers' heads, map and measure their experience, and then leverage that understanding of customers and operationalized view of their experience to make better decisions and identify opportunities for growth. And that's a process that we do with the companies that we work with. It's also the process that we covered in the framework that we covered in our book. It's really just a step-by-step sort of blueprint for how to help your team make better, more informed decisions and just not have to, rely on spaghetti at the wall tactics like so many people do.
So this is always something that I find as a challenge. How do you decide who your best customers are? Does that depend based on the businesses that you're working with? Or is there kind of an algorithm that would work for every single business, regardless of their industry, size, et cetera?
Yeah, this is a really good question. It depends, of course, like all good things, it depends. What I would say is the most straightforward way to think about your best customers and those that you have at your disposal to learn from is who are the folks who, I mean, this depends, obviously it depends on like if you're in a pre-revenue or pre-launch situation versus post-launch. So if you have happily paying customers, they're the subset of your happily paying customers that are getting a recurring sort of value from your offer. If you're not software as a service business or you don't have a recurring revenue model, they would be the customers that come back all the time, right? They're the customers that are extremely happy and the customers that you would want more of, that you would want to clone kind of thing. The other criteria to sort of keep in mind when learning from customers is recency is wildly important. And this is something that actually a lot of folks miss out on, is identifying the folks that are happy with your offering, have received some sort of recurring value and are engaged, but that also signed up recently enough ago or purchased from you recently enough ago that they remember what life was like before. And this is really, really important because I think this is the piece that a lot of people miss is they think about the customer experience as something that happens at sign up, but actually it happens at struggle. Your experience, your customer's experience starts when they first experience the need for and the struggle, experiencing that need for your solution. And so really understanding that problem space is wildly valuable. And I think a lot of people skip out on that. So again, to think about the subset of customers to learn from, obviously happily paying, they've made trade-offs in order to choose you. They've fired other solutions in order to hire yours, but they also made that decision recently enough ago that they viscerally remember how much it sucked to have the problem that you now help them solve. So that's really important too. But obviously the answer to this question is quite a bit wider if you're talking about a company that wants to pivot into a new market or may not have happily paying customers yet or pre-launch or something like that. But brass tacks, that's how I would answer that.
Let's say that we're ready to start doing some of this customer-led focus. Can you walk me through the process of how that research is done? Is it a survey that we send out? Are we having one-on-one conversations? Are we doing focus groups? And I know marketing, it depends, but how do you like to take this on? And does it depend on the type of business and the volume of customers that you see?
Yeah. So One thing that I think we need to remember here is the goals associated with doing this work at all. And that's really important when deciding who you want to learn from. It's really important in deciding what research methods are you going to employ here. It depends on what you're trying to accomplish. So a lot of the companies that reach out to us, they're in one of sort of three situations. One is we know we don't know enough about our customers to make good decisions about how to grow. So they know they've got this like knowledge gap. So the second situation is like something's broken. Our onboarding is broken, or our messaging or positioning is off, or we need to move into a new market where we're changing, pivoting on our target market. And then the third reason, and so you can imagine how that would affect research, right? And what you'd want to learn. And then the third reason is my team needs a more sort of systematic way to think about how to grow. And it's time for us to grow up. And we now what got us here isn't going to get us there. And we need an approach. We need to be able to take an approach as a team that gives us a system to work with and a system within which to make better decisions as a group of individuals trying to make better decisions. So again, you can imagine how that might impact things. So your goals in even conducting this research, you've got to start there. And that's also going to do a lot for buy-in across the organization, because research is the type of thing that can often get stalled out because they've had bad experiences with, research projects that have lasted months and led to, more questions than answers. And there's been a lot of crappy research done over the years, and a lot of people have had bad experiences with that. So that's another thing to take into account as well. So if you're a leader, like a founder or an entrepreneur, you're the leader at that business, then you obviously have a lot more leeway with the type of research that you run, versus if you're somebody in-house, you may have to take sort of baby steps and introduce research in kind of smaller iterative ways to get a little bit of internal buy-in to then take some bigger steps. So with that out of the way, then the other thing that I would say is, yes, it depends on how many people we have to learn from. So if you're in a situation like Bitly is a great example. So Bitly is the type of, I think they've got 6 million users, right? Really broad base of customers, and in all kinds of different like flavors of customers, Fortune 500, solo operators, even down to sort of B2C case scenarios. In that situation, you would start with broad style research like a survey. Thankfully, because of AI, surveys are actually a lot richer in terms of what you can learn at scale than they used to be. So previously, where you might have run a quant survey, which I would never recommend, you'd run a qualitative survey where you'd have open text fields. You'd ask maybe 5 or 6 questions. They'd be all open text so that you can capture really great voice of customer. But at a certain point, you end up with diminishing returns when you're the one interpreting those responses, right? Because there's a human being trying to understand all of those open text sort of responses. So typically you'd cap out at about 25 or 50 responses before you start to see enough patterns. And the human ends up, not adding any more value in their interpretation. That is completely blown out of the water now. You can either leverage AI for interpreting those survey responses or for running the survey. So again, if you're in a situation you've got a lot broad base customers to learn from, I would definitely recommend starting with something like AI moderated interviews or qualitative surveys. And then from there, you can then organize what you learn from customers into groups of either meaningful segments or what they hired your product or service to or solution to solve for them. And then you can go a level deeper, where I would really, really recommend actually like getting on calls and running human interviews with about a dozen or so. So that's, and if you're in a situation where you don't have a few thousand or a few 100,000 customers to learn from, if you're under a couple of hundred, then I would just go directly to those interviews and run our favorite research methodology is really to run a jobs to be done interview to understand what problem were customers trying to solve when they sought you out and chose you over everything else.
Right. Like I'm thinking about our agency, and, we may only have 30 to 50 projects or campaigns or clients that we're running during the course of the year. I don't know that sending out a survey is even going to get us the results we want, but having a one-on-one conversation with an owner or a marketer, taking into consideration that recency that you mentioned,
Yep.
I might be able to glean some ideas and then just hopefully be able to extract that into or extrapolate that into a direction.
Totally. And I would say the important thing there, if you do need to go that direction, the thing to keep in mind is it's really important that you speak to the person. And I recognize that this is a little bit different across organizations that have multiple buyers, but at the start, you're going to want to talk to that person who experienced the problem that you helped solve, right? Was dealing with the old way and also was the main sort of champion in the purchase decision. Now,
Right.
obviously, you might be in a situation where you sell into enterprise and there's multiple buyers, and that's obviously very important to take into account, but start with those champions as opposed to just anybody inside of an account. It's really important who you choose.
So some people are probably listening who are in the midst of running a small business or a medium-sized business, and they may just feel like they do not have the time or the budget to do this type of research. What advice would you give somebody who does have limited time, who does not really have a budget set aside for research?
Yeah. So, this is everyone, right? No small business has a budget set aside for research. I have yet to meet one anyway. Larger organizations know. What I would say in that situation is you're wasting a lot of time not doing this. So this is it's kind of the excuse that I both love to respond to and hate to respond to, because if you are questioning even at all whether or not you need to make a change in your positioning, messaging, if your marketing is not resonating as much as it used to, if your close rate is starting to wane a little bit, or if you're a software company and you've changed your offering to the point where you believe the value that you provide in the market has shifted, do not pass go. Do not spend 1 cent more on marketing because you are filling a leaky bucket. And it's, the tired analogy is very much true. You are going to make so much more informed decisions. Your experiments will be more effective, more fruitful if you are rooting your activities in stuff that actually works and that is validated. You don't need to throw spaghetti at the wall. There's a better way to do it, and it's going to expedite your decision making, and it's going to expedite your ability to make a difference and resonate and have more effective overall marketing, messaging, customer experiences that you're building. You're wasting time and money by not doing this.
All right, I believe you. I'm all in. I've sent out my surveys.
I know it's the vitamin that nobody wants to take, but
Right.
it's also a painkiller. It
All
can
right.
solve a lot of problems.
That's a better way to look at it. Not a vitamin, but a painkiller.
Yeah.
So I've done my research. I've sent out my surveys. Maybe I've run them through AI for sentiment analysis, or I've gotten on a Zoom call with a handful of representative best clients, and I've done the interviews. What do I do now? What's my next step?
So if you have run those conversations well, you followed a general narrative in those conversations. And by the way, I say conversations, but that could be your qualitative surveys or your AI moderated surveys or interviews. You have hopefully followed a series of questions that gets to the heart of what led somebody to need a solution like yours, why they chose yours over all of the other solutions. What was it that convinced them to choose you over all of the other solutions? What are they able to do now that they weren't able to do before? As you might be picking up on, this is sort of like a documentary, like having a documentary-like understanding of your customer's experience from, again, being out in the world, experiencing the problem that you solve, all the way through to singing your praises and never becoming a lifer customer, right? I often describe as like you'd have to pry your solution out of their cold, dead hands kind of customers, right? You understand that customer's life now at these individual levels from beginning to end because you've run research, hopefully through the lens of jobs to be done. And once let's say you've run 10 conversations where you got that documentary like understanding of all of their experiences, you're going to, even as you get into like your third, fourth, fifth conversation, you're going to start to hear the same things again. And that's a really, really good sign. By the time you get to 10, 12, there's going to be some real patterns that emerge. And what you're going to realize is that there are generally about 3 to 5 different, and I'm air quoting here, like jobs to be done that your customers hire your solution to solve for them. They're not all going to be the same. You're going to notice these groupings are going to emerge either because of the circumstances that someone was in or motivations. And you're going to need to make a decision at this point, once you identify these 3 to 5 jobs to be done. And by the way, I recognize I'm talking in like terms that people are like, what? But this is all well documented. There's material online. If you feel like this is something that might work for you, there's lots of material, including our book on how to do this. But you're basically going to need to make a decision, because if you continue to try to serve all of those customer jobs, you are going to continue the same old patterns that you're in right now, where it's not resonating quite enough. And I think that especially now, as marketing is getting louder, competition is getting more fierce, markets are getting more and more saturated, the genuine moat that a lot of businesses have will be, I call it messaging, but it really what I mean by that is like genuine customer understanding and contextual understanding that can be sort of repeated back to your customer through really powerful messaging. And you can't do that unless you start to think about your customers in more narrowed ways. And it might be you just choose not to focus on, 1 or 2 of your customer jobs that you identified in this process, and you zoom into just one. That would be ideal if you're zooming into just one, because then you can really cut deep and really have an impact with that group of customers. So you might be in a situation, some of the teams that we work with want to continue to address 2. That's totally fine. But I would absolutely recommend segmenting. There are all kinds of ways to do that. I recorded a podcast episode actually on how to think about segmentation, either in your marketing, on your website, in your onboarding. But that's really what I would say is like, you have to choose a customer, one of these customer jobs, and then your next step in the process is basically understanding their end-to-end experience and doing kind of the secret shopper thing. So it's advantageous to have somebody outside of the building, so to speak, do this process, right? Go through this end-to-end experience and document the process. But wearing the hat or the shoes or the glasses or whatever of this customer with this job to be done, go through your customer experience. Look at your marketing, look at your website, go through your onboarding, look at those materials, look at your product or, whatever experience you've provided, and really look at it through the lens of customers with that job to be done. And you are going to identify all kinds of opportunities to improve. You're going to see all the ways that you're dropping the ball, all the ways that you're making things harder for your customer. We talk about this as the customer experience mapping process, where you're identifying these sort of major milestones in your customer's relationship with you. And if you can operationalize those and identify these particular milestones, which we often refer to as your customers, the leaps of faith that your customer takes in your relationship with you. If you can identify those milestones, you can associate KPIs with those milestones, right? That measure your customer's ability to reach moments of value and get to one step to the next in your customer's experience. All those opportunities, you're going to understand how to address those opportunities and how to measure your ability to help customers get from one milestone to the next. So we call that the customer experience mapping process, and then the identifying your growth opportunities on the the other side of that. So there's some work to do. But it's what I find happens is it's kind of disheartening in some ways, because you're like, I just redid my onboarding. We spent months rebuilding this thing, or we just redesigned our website, or we just rewrote these pages on our website. And you start to realize like, oh, actually, we're not actually using the right messaging. We don't have, our hierarchy of messaging is not right, or the order of events that we're introducing our product to customers doesn't make as much sense. And so that can really suck. But at the same time, you can get really excited about the fact that you have all this, you can make better decisions now, and it's so much easier.
And it's better to make a U-turn than it is to keep driving in the wrong direction. So I love the whole thing about the customer mapping and these milestones, and we're trying to get them from one place to another. Can you anchor that at all for us? Can you give us an example of somebody you've worked with, and maybe like one specific thing, just so we have an understanding exactly of what that might look like?
Yeah. So, in general, we talk about the customer experience through the lens of like three phases, high level: the struggle phase, the evaluation phase, and the growth phase. The struggle phase is what it sounds like. Your customer is experiencing the old way. They're struggling with the old way. They realize, nope, can't do this anymore, need something new. And then they start their sort of active seeking out of a new solution, and they may get introduced to your offering in some way, and may land on your website. And they're still in this situation. This is still struggle phase. They're on your website. They're still struggling with the old way. And they're looking at your solution against potentially some of your competitors, again, still in the context that they're struggling with the old way. So we still call this the struggle phase, right? They discover your solution and they decide, you know what? This sounds like me. This sounds like they understand exactly what my problem is, and I'm going to give this a try. And so they go from the problem in general, the struggle phase, we say it breaks down in like the problem milestone and interest. And then we move into evaluation. And so this is when somebody actually takes a leap of faith on your website and decides that, I'm going to hand over some information, either because they're going to book a demo with you, or they're going to try your product, or whatever it is. Then we move into evaluation phase where here's where there are variables. So depending on how complex your solution is, or how complex the organization of your customer is, the evaluation phase could vary in milestones. What we have found is there's often like the first value milestone and the value realization milestone. But sometimes when there's more complex situations, there's also one in the middle where it's like value promise. Think of like enterprise software where you might need a proof of concept, right? There might need to be, there's more involvement of additional stakeholders. It might be more complex. That sometimes happens, but we try to keep it as simple as possible. So again, the evaluation phase, first value realization, and then there's the growth phase. And this is the one that gets neglected the most, unfortunately, but particularly for recurring revenue businesses. And I cannot think of any business that does not want recurring business, right? Or recurring revenue in some way, shape, or form. So the growth phase is really where we're considering and thinking a lot about delivering continued value to our customers. And then really importantly, the next one would be value growth. So some sort of expanded value in some way, shape, or form. And that will look very different depending on your solution. If we're talking about software, that might be expanded usage of your product. It might be referrals or reviews, or becoming an evangelist for your product. Who knows, right? That there's all kinds of flavors of what value growth might look like. But I break it down in this way because it's helpful to, as a sort of blueprint for figuring out, does this apply? But you still have the job of understanding your customers, what's going through their head. We think about it through the lens of like thinking, feeling, and doing. So generally what they're feeling will help you understand what they're thinking, and what they're thinking will generally help you understand what they're doing, like the actual touch points. So if you can do that for each of those milestones, and you can identify ways to measure your ability to help customers get from one milestone to the next, then everything starts to make a lot more sense in terms of how to optimize the customer experience. So pretty well every company that we've gone through this process over 100 times with SaaS companies, and I've done this hundreds of times with teams. And generally, we're looking at about those 6 or 7 milestones, and very, very often, pretty well 10 times out of 10, there are ways to optimize messaging across every single one of those milestones. But very, very often as well, the second thing that I would say is the most common is onboarding, is where the most amount of money is sort of being left on the table. And I say that because if you don't have a solid onboarding experience, then all the investment you're making at the front end of your customer experience is, again, back to the leaky bucket. So that's generally where we're focused, is messaging and onboarding, and help customers reach critical moments of value to convince them to keep going and to fire their old solution and, reach that value realization and make a purchase decision.
And you're in a SaaS world, so yes, onboarding is critical. In that SaaS world, where does onboarding come? Is that before or after the free trial? Is that before or after I put down my credit card for good?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think there's a lot of misconceptions around that. So generally there's no hard fast rule on this because the most important thing is your leading indicators of success. So like I've reached an aha moment in this product or I've experienced first value versus the lagging indicators of success like a trial start or a trial end or credit card being entered. We really prefer to focus on product activation, product adoption, product engagement, right? So like actual value being experienced inside of the product, which is why a lot of product teams really like this framework and the way that we work because it is so anchored in the product experience delivering value. So it's hard to say. I can't give a blanket response in terms of like where it would line up with the trial. In general, you should be doing a good job of helping customers reach, if not product activation, product adoption inside of a trial experience. So if you offer a 14-day trial, your goal inside of those 14 days or is your goal actually probably within the first couple of hours or days is to help that customer reach those critical moments of value so that when their trial ends, there's no debate about whether or not they're putting their credit card down.
All right. Now, on the Agents of Change podcast, we're always looking for really ways that we can make a difference, make a change. Do you know of a widely accepted piece of advice when it comes to customer research that you actually feel is holding back businesses or just really bad advice in your experience?
So many. I'm not sure where to start. There's so much. The first one that came into my mind when I heard the question was test it. And a few reasons for that. The other one, you should be selling benefits, not features. I also take issue with that. And this might be surprising coming from me, like the customer is always right. And, that what customers say they want must be what they want. That's often not the case. It's your job to sort of see around that. But the test it one is probably an easy one because it's so prolific right now, especially with vibe marketing. It's all kind of about testing things. And I'm not against testing or experimentation at all. What I am against, though, is wasting your time on tests that are useless and that aren't actually going to move the needle on revenue. So they might move the needle on a conversion rate on a landing page, but are they actually going to turn into, are those leads or those signups going to turn into high lifetime value customers or not? And I think a lot of experimentation leaves out that really critical component. A lot of testing and experimentation is very short-sighted. And so again, if you can learn from these amazing customers that have made trade-offs in order to choose you over all of the other solutions, the experiments that you're going to run on the other side of that are going to be so much more fruitful through the lens of actual revenue generation versus just conversion rates on a campaign or a page.
All right. For somebody who wants to become more customer-led in their marketing and growth strategy, what's one step they can take after listening to this episode?
What I would say is a really amazing thing that you can do that actually does not have a very big lift at all, and that could convince you to keep going with this is on your website, on your primary CTA on your website, whether or not it's signing up for a free trial or signing up for a demo or something like that, though, not like a lead. I'm not talking about signing up for a lead magnet here. I'm talking about like a primary CTA on your website. Asking the question, somebody who's just taken a leap of faith and decided to give you the time of day, asking them what was going on in your world. Now, this doesn't have to be exact copy, but something close to this. What was going on in your world that led you to seek out something like this today? Like what led you today to reach out? And have that be an open text field. And even if all you do is let the responses to that go into a doc or a spreadsheet or something, after not too long, you're going to see some patterns emerge. And that can be wildly valuable because that's going to start to tell you like what job are we actually doing for our customers? And I think even just the responses to those questions are going to show you there's a lot more to learn there. And there's a big opportunity. So that would be my that's something that you can probably turn around in a week, not even.
Awesome. For people who want to learn more about you, Gia, want to learn more about Forget the Funnel and your book, where can we send them online?
Yeah, I mean, forgetthefunnel.com obviously is a great place to go. There's a link there to find out more about the book. We were very deliberate in writing a short book. So it's not this big, long theoretical. It's very, very practical. There's also an AI like workbook companion that goes along with the book that includes a bunch of templates and tools and scripts. And, for running this type of research and then leveraging it and operationalizing it. So we try to make it super, super practical. That would definitely be the thing that I would recommend if anybody's interested.
All right. And we'll link to all of those resources in the show notes. Gia, thank you so much. Really appreciate our conversation today.
Thanks for having me.
Lots of great content from Gia today. If you missed any of it, don't worry. We've got you covered. Just head on over to theagentsofchange.com/591. You'll find the audio, the full transcript, a blog post, and all the links that Gia shared with us so that you can up your game. If you want to change the trajectory of your business starting today, add one simple, open-ended question to your website contact form. What led you to seek out something like this today? Put it in your own words. Then begin acting on what you hear and become an agent of change.
Don't miss another thrilling episode of the Agents of Change podcast. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform.